You ever notice how everybody talks about common sense, like it's this big, shiny tool that everybody's got in their back pocket, like it's some universal Swiss Army knife of wisdom that works the same way for everyone? Just use some common sense. Yeah, sure, but if it were really common, why the hell is it so rare? It's like saying, just breathe air. We all breathe air, but apparently, when it comes to thinking straight, half the population is holding their breath and turning purple. People love to brag about their common sense. They'll say, well, I just got good old-fashioned common sense. Oh, really? That's what you've got, common sense? Funny thing is, the minute somebody tells you they've got common sense, you can bet your last quarter they're about to do something profoundly stupid. That's how you know it's a scam. If somebody's really got it, they don't need to announce it. Nobody brags about tying their shoes. Nobody says, hey, look at me, I can walk upright. You just do it. But common sense, oh no, that needs a press release. And here's the dirty little secret. What you think is common sense, the guy next to you thinks is lunacy. One person says, common sense tells you to get married young and have lots of kids. The next person says, common sense tells you to stay single and keep your sanity. Which one's right? Neither, both. Depends who you ask. Common sense isn't common, it's just my sense. But nobody wants to admit that because it ruins the illusion that we all live in some logical, shared universe. Take driving, for example. Everybody thinks they're a good driver. Everybody. I've got common sense behind the wheel. Yeah, right. Then how come the left lane is filled with idiots going slower than a funeral procession, and the right lane's got maniacs treating it like the Indy 500? Somebody's common sense is lying. You're yelling. It's common sense to stay out of the fast lane if you're slow. The other guy's yelling. It's common sense to drive slow and safe. And meanwhile, the guy on his cell phone eating a cheeseburger thinks it's common sense to steer with his knees. That's the big problem. Everybody's common sense is customized. It's like a build, your own Sunday bar, except instead of sprinkles and fudge, you get bad ideas and half-baked logic. My common sense tells me I don't need to wear sunscreen. Fine. Next week, your face looks like a leather couch. My common sense says I don't need to read the instructions. Fine. Now you've got 6 extra screws and a bookshelf that collapses when you put a paperback on it. Indeed, don't get me started on parents. Every parent thinks they're loaded with common sense. They hand it down to their kids like it's some ancient treasure chest of wisdom. I'm teaching my kid common sense. No, you're teaching them your weird habits. That's all. One dad says it's common sense to fix everything with duct tape. Another says it's common sense to hire a professional. One mom says it's common sense to put butter on a burn. The other says it's common sense to rush to the emergency room. Which one is it? Well, one gives you a scar and the other gives you a bill. Congratulations, either way you lose. It's all a cultural thing too. What counts as common sense in one place looks completely insane somewhere else. Some folks think it's common sense to shake hands. Others think it's common sense not to touch strangers at all. Some people think it's common sense to eat everything on your plate because there are starving kids out there. Others think it's common sense to stop eating when you're full. Meanwhile, those starving kids never got the memo because nobody mailed them your leftover meatloaf. You'd think after thousands of years of being on this planet, human beings would have nailed down at least a few rules that everybody agrees on. You know, real common sense, but nope, we still argue about the simplest stuff, like, do you put the toilet paper roll over or under? Half the world says over, the other half says under, and the third half hasn't even noticed because they're too busy playing with their phone on the toilet. If we can't even reach consensus on bathroom equipment, how the hell are we gonna solve anything bigger? And have you noticed the people who complain the most about the lack of common sense are usually the ones not using any? They love pointing it out in others. This country's going down the tubes because nobody's got common sense anymore. Yeah, and you're the guy who locked his keys in the car while it was still running. Common sense, my ass. It's just a polite way of saying, why doesn't everybody think like me? Let's talk about politicians for a second. Don't worry, I won't pick sides, because honestly, both sides are selling the same nonsense. Every politician loves to say, we just need a little common sense in government. Great idea. Then they go and pass a law with 400 pages of fine print, 600 loopholes, and a tax on something you didn't even know you owned. Common sense legislation, they call it. Common sense says if you need a lawyer and a magnifying glass to understand it, it ain't common, and it sure as hell doesn't make sense. But maybe that's the trick. Maybe we don't actually want common sense, because if sense was really common, you'd have to admit you're just as dumb as everybody else, and nobody wants that. We want to believe we've got the secret knowledge, the golden ticket, the magical brain that sees the truth nobody else sees. That's why people treat common sense like a personal trophy. I've got it, you don't, and that makes me smarter. But it doesn't. It just makes you louder. I'll give you an example. People say, it's common sense to save money for a rainy day. A nice thought. But you know what else is common? People being broke. It's common sense not to touch a hot stove. Sure, but every single kid, touches the damn stove anyway, because common sense isn't common. It's learned the hard way, usually with a scream and a blister. We only call it common once everybody's already burned themselves, and that's the joke. It's not common sense, it's common experience. You fall, you fail, you screw up, you learn. Then you look back and say, oh, that was obvious. Well, it wasn't obvious before you made the mistake, was it? You didn't have sense, you had hope. Big difference. And hope doesn't save you from a hot stove, a dumb law, or a bad marriage. So let's stop pretending there's some universal rulebook of wisdom that everyone's got memorized. Because if there were, it'd be laminated, stuck in every glove compartment, and written in giant letters, "Don't be an idiot." But until that day comes, all we've got are 7 billion versions of common sense, none of which seem to match, and half of which involve sticking a fork in a toaster. And the best part is, even when somebody finally figures something out, humanity has the memory span of a goldfish. We forget instantly. Don't touch the stove becomes, well, maybe this stove is different. Don't eat that, it made you sick last time becomes, well, maybe this time it'll be fine. Don't date that person, they're a disaster becomes, well, maybe they've changed. And then we end up right back where we started, burned, sick, and heartbroken, all in the name of good old common sense. So the next time somebody tells you they've got common sense, just smile, nod, and walk away. Because if it were really common, you wouldn't need to hear about it. You'd see it in action. Until then, we're all just faking it together, stumbling around in the dark, calling it wisdom when it's really just guesswork with a confident tone. And that's why common sense isn't very common after all. Oh, you know what really helps keep common sense uncommon society? That's right, the big machine we're all stuck in. Schools, television, advertisements, magazines, talk shows, politicians, church sermons, boardrooms, office memos, all of it. We've got a whole system designed to make sure people don't think too much, don't ask too many questions, and definitely don't get too smart. Because if you had a world full of sharp, skeptical, well-informed people with working brains, you wouldn't need common sense. People would just, since you wouldn't even have to call it anything. But no, Can't have that. We've got to sand it down, dumb it up, and make sure every generation starts fresh with just enough brainpower to operate a remote control and punch in a P.N. number. Take school, for starters. They don't want thinkers. They want repeaters. Memorize this list, spit it back out. Forget it next week. That's the formula. You sit there for 12 years learning the capital of Wyoming, how to convert fractions, and which year some king sneezed on the battlefield. Then they push you out the door and say, "Go live your life." And you can't even figure out how to fill out a tax form or fix a leaky faucet. But boy, oh boy, you can sure recite the Pythagorean theorem. Isn't that useful? Next time your toilet overflows, just stand over it and shout A squared plus B squared equals C squared. See how far that gets you. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying learning is bad. But it's not learning, is it? It's memorization, conditioning, programming. They don't train you to think, they train you to comply. Raise your hand, stand in line, ask permission, sit still, don't question rules. That's the real curriculum. They don't want independent thought, they want predictable behavior, because a room full of kids who think for themselves would be chaos. You'd have 25 little rebels throwing logic grenades at every lesson. Why do we have to learn this? Why do we have to sit here? Why do you get to tell us what to do? Teachers don't want that. Principals don't want that. Politicians definitely don't want that. So instead, they keep it nice and simple, just enough knowledge to get through life, not enough to challenge the people running it. Then you graduate and you think, finally, I'm free. But no, no, no. You're not free. You've just moved on to the next layer of the scam. The media, television, radio, newspapers, billboards, they've all got the same goal. Keep you distracted and keep you docile. You ever notice the news isn't really news? It's weather, traffic, sports, and a murder. That's the format, same every night, and sprinkled in between. Commercials telling you you're not good enough unless you buy something. Here's a new shampoo. Here's a new car. Here's a new cereal that tastes exactly like the old cereal, but costs 50 cents more. And people eat it up. They eat it up because they've been trained since birth to believe that somebody else always knows better. If the TV says it, it must be true. If the commercial says it, it must be right. Doctor recommended. Which doctor? Who cares? He was wearing a white coat. That's all I need. It's amazing how easy it is to sell nonsense. Slap the word new on a box, people buy it. Call it limited edition, they buy too. Throw in a celebrity smiling like an idiot, they'll buy a whole truckload. Where's the common sense? Shouldn't people know that toothpaste is toothpaste, soap is soap, and soda is just sugar water? No, because common sense doesn't sell, confusion sells, insecurity sells, making you feel dumb sells, because if you had real common sense, you'd stop buying half the garbage they throw at you, and that, my friends, is bad for business. And don't think you're safe if you avoid television. Oh no, society has ways of getting to you anywhere. Magazines at the grocery store checkout line, full of articles about diets that don't work and celebrities you don't care about. Talk shows where experts argue over things nobody can fix. Billboards screaming at you while you sit in traffic. Eat here, buy this, visit us. The message is always the same. You're not complete unless you listen to us, which is funny because if you had any actual common sense, you'd tell them to shove it. But here's the best part. Even when you try to escape the noise, they'll find you at work, because jobs are designed to drain whatever scraps of independent thought you've got left. Don't ask questions, just follow the procedure. That's the whole point of most jobs. It doesn't matter if the procedure is stupid, inefficient, or makes no sense at all. Your boss will say, that's the policy. And you'll say, but it's dumb. And they'll say, doesn't matter, it's policy. A common sense would fix half the workplace problems in one afternoon, but policy crushes common sense like a bug under a shoe. And if you try to use your brain, if you actually come up with a better idea, they don't thank you, they write you up. Don't get smart, Johnson, just do as you're told. That's what it's really about, not making you stupid, keeping you obedient. Obedience is the currency. The less you think, the easier you are to manage. That's why jobs keep you tired, broke, and stressed out. That's why the news keeps you scared. That's why the commercials keep you insecure. A thinking, rested, confident person with some money in their pocket. Dangerous, that's a person who might start asking questions, and society doesn't want questions. They want consumers. They want employees. They want believers. They don't want thinkers. And of course, every now and then, somebody notices. Somebody wakes up and says, "Hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense." And what happens? They get labeled as a troublemaker, a rebel, a cynic, a weirdo, because nothing scares society more than someone using their brain. Imagine if everybody did it. Imagine if millions of people just stopped and said, "Hold on, that's stupid, I'm not doing that." The whole machine would collapse in a week, but it won't happen because they've built a system where we police ourselves. That's the genius of it. You don't need the government to tell you to shut up. Your neighbor will do it. Your co-worker will do it. Your family will do it. Don't rock the boat. Don't question things. Don't make a fuss. Just use some common sense. And by common sense, they mean the sense we told you to have. The sense that says, buy the product, believe the commercial, trust the politician, follow the rule, don't ask why. That's not sense, that's submission. Real common sense would look at half the stuff we're told and laugh it right out of the room. Real common sense would see through the scams, the gimmicks, the empty promises. Real common sense would save you money, time, and headaches. And that's why you're not allowed to have it. Because if too many people started thinking clearly, too many people stopped buying garbage, too many people stopped obeying nonsense rules, this whole beautiful circus would fall apart. So society does what it does best, keeps us entertained, distracted, and comfortable enough to stay quiet. Keep watching the show, keep punching the clock, keep swiping the card. Don't look too close. Don't think too hard, and for God's sake, don't compare notes with your neighbors, because the moment enough of us realize how much crap we've been fed, common sense might actually become common, and they can't let that happen. And that's why society's main job is to keep common sense uncommon. You know what I love? The comedy of everyday life, because that's where the truth leaks out. People are funny, sometimes on purpose, but usually by accident. And the accidents are the best, because that's when you really see the gap between what should be obvious and what actually happens. That's where the real show is. People walk around acting like they've got everything figured out, but you watch them long enough, you realize we're all starring in the world's dumbest sitcom, and the punchline is always the same. "Oh, I thought that was common sense." Look at people in the supermarket, aisles of food, signs hanging everywhere, labels in big block letters. You'd think it would be easy, but no. You've got people standing there, staring at a can of beans like it's a quantum physics problem. Do I want the large beans or the small beans? Large is bigger, but small is smaller. What do I do? I don't know. Maybe flip a coin, Socrates. Meanwhile, they're blocking the aisle with a cart the size of a studio apartment, and you can't get by. Common sense says move the cart, but no, they stand there frozen, as if the fate of humanity depends on their choice of legumes. And then they pick the one that was already on their list to begin with. And what about self-checkout? That's where human folly really shines. The machine tells you what to do. Put the item in the bagging area. Put the item in the bagging area. You've heard it 5 times, but people still look around like, what bagging area? It's the only bagging area in the whole store. Genius. It's the flat, empty square thing directly in front of you. But instead they're waving the box of cereal over the scanner like they're trying to exorcise a demon. The guy behind them is fuming, the machine is screaming, and they're still Confused, common sense should tell you that technology has limits, but people think waving your hand faster will make the computer smarter. Then you get the parking lot. People can't handle parking lots. All you've got to do is follow the arrows and park between two lines. That's it. Too simple. Steps, but no. People turn it into a demolition derby. Cars zigzagging across the lanes, people backing out without looking, some clown parked diagonally across 3 spaces because he thinks his '98 minivan is a luxury car. You want to know why common sense isn't common? Take a stroll through any Walmart parking lot on a Saturday afternoon. It's like a live-action safety video that failed the test. And of course, there's always the people who can't read signs. Big, bold letters saying exit. What do? They walk in. They always walk in. The door practically screams at them, not this way. And they say, nah, I think I'll try it anyway. Then they get mad at the door. They push, they pull, they shake it like it owes them money. Common sense says if the door doesn't open, maybe try the one marked enter. But apparently that requires a PhD in advanced door technology. Bathrooms are another comedy show. Ever walk into a public bathroom and see somebody trying to figure out the sink? It's either one of those motion sensor jobs that only works when you do a secret hand dance, or it's one of those faucets where you've got to hold the knob down with one hand while you try to soap up with the other. People are waving, slapping, praying, nothing happens, and when they finally get water, it lasts for exactly 1 second. You can't wash your hands in 1 second. You can barely sneeze in 1 second, but they stand there thinking, well, that's all the water I get. Guess I'll just rub my hands together like a cricket. And dryers. Don't get me started on hand dryers. You put your hands under, it blows a gentle puff of warm air that couldn't dry a Kleenex, and people stand there rubbing and rubbing, waiting for a miracle. Common sense says this isn't working, but no, they stand there for 5 minutes, then walk out wiping their wet hands on their pants. We live in a world where drying your hands is harder than flying a plane, and nobody thinks that's weird. It's everywhere. People can't use escalators. They step on like they're boarding a rocket ship. They hesitate, freeze, jump, and then grab the rail like it's dragging them to hell. Same with revolving doors. You'd think it's simple. Step in, walk forward, step out. But no, you always get somebody who doesn't move fast enough, and suddenly you're in a human traffic jam inside a spinning glass box. And best part, they act surprised, like they didn't see the door spinning before they got in. Wow, this thing moves. Yeah, that's the point, Einstein, and elevators. That's where human folly is at its finest. People push the button once, the light comes on, that should be enough. But no, they keep pushing it over and over, like it's going to make the elevator arrive faster. Common sense says electricity works. The same whether you push the button once or 50 times, but people think they're sending a stronger signal to the elevator gods, and then, once they get in, they stand there, glued to their phone, completely blocking the doors, and you've got to shove past them like you're invading Normandy just to get off on your floor. And don't even get me started on people and money. People will buy anything if you tell them it's a deal. It doesn't matter if they need it. Doesn't matter if it works. If there's a sign that says sale, they're in. They'll buy a toaster shaped like a duck, a blanket with sleeves, a gadget that peels bananas for you, because it was 30% off. Common sense says if you never needed a banana peeler before, you probably don't need one now, but the word sale turns brains into mashed potatoes. And then there's credit cards. People treat credit like free money. I'll just put it on the card. Sure, why not? Who cares about 18% interest, right? Common sense says if you don't have the money, you can't afford it. But people don't use common sense with credit, they use hope. Hope that someday, somehow, a magical pile of money will show up in their lives. Maybe from a lottery ticket, maybe from a rich uncle, maybe from the couch cushions. And until then, they'll just keep swiping the card, smiling at the cashier, and digging the hole deeper. And family, oh, family is a never-ending comedy. You'd think families would run on common sense, because you've got years of shared experience. But no, families are where sense goes to die. Parents who give their kids candy and soda at bedtime, then complain the kids won't sleep. Grandparents who swear by old remedies like rubbing whiskey on a baby's gums. Cousins who borrow money and never pay it back. Thanksgiving dinners where everybody fights about politics even though they promised not to. Common sense says, don't bring up politics at Thanksgiving. But every year somebody does, and every year the turkey ends up cold while Uncle Joe lectures the stuffing about taxes. And then there's technology. People love their gadgets, but they don't know how to use them. You've got smartphones smarter than the people holding them. Folks squinting at the screen, poking it with one finger like they're afraid it might explode. They can't figure out how to change a ringtone, but they'll walk around telling everybody how tech-savvy they are, and computers forget it. People get a pop-up window that says, "Are you sure?" And they panic. "Am I sure? I don't know if I'm sure. Honey, am I sure?" It's a pop-up, not an existential crisis. It's the little things that show you how uncommon common sense really is. The guy who microwaves fish in the office break room, the woman who takes 15 items into the express checkout, the neighbor who mows the lawn at 6 in the morning, the guy at the movie theater who explains the plot out loud as it's happening, the lady who puts her turn signal on after she's already turned. Common sense should cover this stuff, but apparently it doesn't. And that's the funny part, the comedy of human folly. We stumble, we screw up, we contradict ourselves, and we do it all with a straight face. We think we're rational creatures, logical beings, masters of our own fate. But the truth is, we're all a little nuts, and most of what we do makes no sense at all. Which is why laughter is so important. Because if you can't laugh at stupidity, yours, mine, everybody's, you're going to go crazy. You'll spend your life yelling at idiots in traffic and screaming at broken vending machines, and that's no way to live. So laugh at it. Laugh at the guy who can't work the self-checkout. Laugh at the neighbor with the diagonal minivan. Laugh at yourself when you forget your keys for the 3rd time today. Because the world's a mess, people are ridiculous, and the only real common sense left is knowing how to enjoy the joke. And that's why laughter is the only sense that's still common.